Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Marty Ross, and this is another Conversations with Marty Ross MD tonight. As you know, this is a webinar where we talk about Lyme disease. No two webinars are the same because you create them each time with your questions, and I'm very interested to see what you have in store for me tonight. Sometimes I get stumped, as you know, but for the most part, I should be able to give you some things to think about. Tonight, I will be doing a recording of the webinar. I think many of you are aware of that. And tomorrow morning, probably sometime before 9:30 Central Standard Time, I will send out an email giving you information, notifying you that recording is ready, but also have information about where you can look at it. Also in that email will be a sign up for next week's webinar. Next week, we will do a webinar, but I think I'm going to shorten it by half an hour. It'll probably be a 1 hour webinar next week instead of the hour and a half that we're likely to spend tonight. Or together tonight, that is. During the webinar tonight, I'm going to post your questions on the screen. So if you happen to be participating in the live version of this webinar, not watching a recorded version of it, you'll actually see the recording up on the screen, okay? It doesn't show up in the recorded versions though, and because it doesn't, I will read the questions out loud as well too. Some of you know that from previous webinars that if you post a really long question, I can't put that on the screen because actually those long questions, for various reasons, if I try to post them, tie up my whole screen on this end and make it so I can't continue with the webinar. So for extremely long ones, I probably will not be posting those, all right? I'm trying to think if there's anything else I need to say here tonight. Oh, yeah. For those of you that are new here, I forgot to tell you how you do this. So over here on the bottom of the right-hand side of the screen is a chat box. You can write your question to me through that chat box. I ask that you do not hit the enter key until your whole question is written. And the reason is every time you hit the enter key, it sends a separate question my direction. And if you have to break your questions into multiple small questions, it gets hard for me to follow all of those parts on my end, okay? So please, the only thing I ask is that you don't hit the enter key until your whole question is done, okay? And so with that, let's go ahead and get started here. All right, first question is from Sherry. Hi, Sherry. Let's see, I suspect mold exposure might be hindering my recovery from Lyme disease. We recently uncovered black mold in the house, a Chitonium species to be exact. I don't want to do the expensive urine test because of several missing genes in my DNA and inability to detoxify. I'm doubtful it would be positive. Are all black molds treated the same? Would cholestyramine be a good binder for Chitonium mold, or would another binder such as charcoal, chlorella, bentonite be better in this instance? Okay, let me just talk about that. So when we're talking about, there is a situation that you're aware of called mold toxins, okay, or mold toxin illness. And what happens in about 25% of people when we breathe in, drink in, eat in mold toxins from the environment around us, we're unable to remove them, okay? So in 75% of us, what happens is those mold toxins eventually work their way into our bloodstream. Our immune system sees them, and our immune system will tag them for removal. They get broken down, they get removed. In 25% of people, what happens is the immune system does not tag those mold toxins, and that's because of a specific genetic defect, which is probably different than the detoxing defects that you have identified, okay? Because the specific test for this kind of genetic defect is something called an HLA-DR test, okay? And if you've sent your blood off to like a 23andMe or one of those places, they have not done the HLA-DR. It's a separate test that has to be ordered, distinctly different than like a 23andMe genetic profile, for instance, okay? So just want to let you know that. But 23andMe, those kind of genetic profiles have shown you are something called SNP defects. That is different than the genetic defect that leads to the immune system not being able to see mold toxins, and therefore the immune system can't tag them, okay? That defect that happens in 25% of people is called an HLA-DR defect, and the blood test that would identify that is an HLA-DR test, okay? Now, having said that, I don't like the HLA-DR test because I think it doesn't accurately define who has the problem. So for instance, I've had people with positive HLA-DR profiles and I try to remove mold toxins and we get nowhere. All right. And that's because I don't think it correctly identifies everyone. Secondly, I've had people with HLA-DR profiles that are completely normal, and yet I still had a strong suspicion the person had mold toxicity illness. I put them on binders and they got a lot better. Okay, so that's what I would see in my practice in Seattle. All right, so I don't think it's the best test. I think the way to figure out if you truly have a mold toxin illness is to do the urine test that I know you're concerned about the cost on that. Okay, but that's the best way to find out. Okay, now, Chitonium that you've mentioned here is a type of mold, and it makes certain toxins. Okay, so by comparison, there's something called black mold, which is trichosethene. That's the toxin it makes. Okay, and black mold is different than Chitonium. All right, now Chitonium may make a mold that looks black, but it's different than that black mold that everyone talks about. Okay. All right. Now the toxins that can be released by Chitonium, I believe, and I don't know for sure off the top of my head, but I think there may be possibly ochratoxin and maybe aflatoxin. I'm not quite clear, but it's not going to be the same toxin as true black mold toxin, which is something called trichosethene. Okay. Now, the reason I'm raising that is when it comes to removing mold toxins, there are different binders that work better for different toxins. Okay. So Chitonium releases certain toxins. Aspergillus, which is another common mold that's found in wet buildings, releases certain toxins. Black mold releases certain toxins, okay? And doing a urine test can identify the various types of toxins that are in you, all right? All right, now why that's important is different binders that we use to pull those toxins out of you work better on certain toxins, okay? All right, so the main reason to actually think about doing one of these urine tests is that the urine tests actually have the ability to tell what toxin types are in you. Basically, although you've identified Chitonium, I can't tell you what toxins from that Chitonium you actually breathed into you, okay? Nor can I tell you for sure if it is your problem. All right, now, so the testing that I have used in my patients in Seattle, and I still think is a good way to do, is using a lab called Real-Time Labs, and they're going to look to see if you have 4 types of mold toxins. Okay, there's another lab called Great Plains Lab that I believe is offering a lower cost way to do it. They're using a different technique to see if you have those mold toxins actually trapped in you. Okay, so you may want to look at that as well too. All right, but you've asked, what could you do if you don't want to do any testing at all? Okay. And so in my practice, when I was practicing, one thing I would do sometimes from people that really did not have resources to test, and there was a high likelihood that they've had mold exposures, is I would go ahead and put them on what I would call a universal mold toxin binder. Okay. One of those could be cholestyramine. Cholestyramine probably does a good job of binding up the various kinds of toxins. That's one option. All right. The other option would be to use, that I would try with my patients who did not want to do the prescription cholestyramine, would be to do a mixture of activated charcoal and bentonite clay. Okay. So activated charcoal binds certain toxins, bentonite clay binds other toxins. And when you put the two together, they cover pretty much most of the toxins that somebody might have trapped in them. All right. So typical dose that I was using for my patients would be, or that works, is working up to 500 milligrams 3 times a day of activated charcoal and working up to 500 milligrams 3 times a day of bentonite clay. Okay, that's an option. Okay, now, whenever I found when I was working with people with Lyme that had mold toxicity illness, what I discovered, and I know others write about this as well too. So there's another doctor that writes a lot about mold toxin illness named Neil Nathan, and Neil is very clear about talking about that you've got to start low and slow. Okay, meaning You don't want to go to the high doses of your binders right away. You want to start slowly with them, because the problem is when you start pulling toxins out of you, mold toxins out of you, the problem is that can sometimes trigger a flare up in inflammation chemicals called cytokines. Okay. And as many of you know that have participated in my webinars before, the way that I like to describe Lyme disease is that Lyme disease is a syndrome of too many cytokines. Those cytokines are made by white blood cells when they see Lyme infection, and they make them too much. And it's those excess cytokines that make it so you can't sleep, make it so you can't think, make you hurt all over, et cetera. I mean, I could go down all the what we call Lyme symptoms, and they're really too many cytokine symptoms, all right? Having too many mold toxins in you also triggers excess cytokines, so that illness can look just like Lyme does, okay? And if you start pulling those mold toxins out too quickly, they also trigger more cytokines to be made. It's not truly a Herx reaction, but it is a worsening because you get more cytokines, all right? So you have to start slow. So generally, if I were to do like a cholestyramine, I might start at 1 scoop 1 time a day, eventually trying to work up to 1 scoop 3 times a day. If I were to do that activated charcoal along with bentonite clay, I might start doing 1 pill, 500 milligram pill of each 1 time a day, and then gradually work up to 3 times a day. Okay. All right. Now, with your binders, as many of you know, you have to be careful about how you time your other medications, because those binders won't necessarily just bind up toxins in your intestines to get them out. Those binders also may bind up your medications and supplements, okay? So what you need to do is stop all medicines and supplements 30 minutes before taking a binder, and then you can resume taking them 2 hours after you have your binder. In terms of eating, you can actually eat anytime, okay? All right, now, one more thing, because I didn't explain why do you even use binders in these things, okay? So let's talk about that. So what happens, according to the work of a physician named Richie Shoemaker, who's the one that came up with this whole concept of mold toxin illness, what Richie was able to show is that, again, 25% of us have an HLA-DR defect, where our immune systems are not programmed correctly by our genetic system to actually identify and break down the mold toxins, okay? All right. So what happens in 75% of us, where everything is working fine, our immune system tags those toxins to be removed, they get pulled out, okay? All right, but if we're one of the 25%, what happens is those toxins go to the liver. The liver is supposed to process them from a fat toxin into a water toxin, but it's not able to, okay? And so what happens is they go to the liver fat-based, they come out of the liver fat-based, they go out into the intestines and into our bile system, and they get reabsorbed again, all right? So they get back into our bloodstream. So it's just like this swimming pool of recirculating toxins that you can't get out. And in there, they keep triggering too many cytokines to be made. So you just stay sick, okay? So the idea of using a binder, a pill that you take, is that it gets into the intestines and it binds those toxins so that they cannot get reabsorbed back into the bloodstream, all right? Now, if you're going to do an approach, or what I would do, and this is something you probably talk to your physician about, especially if you're going to work with cholestyramine, is if you're going to do a trial without doing testing, I would do that for about 2 months with my patients, okay? So I would do a 2-month trial, see if we make any headway. If not, then it definitely is time to come back and do the testing of the urine mold toxin test, so you can see what kind of mold toxins really are in there, so that you can identify what really is the best binder based upon the fingerprint of those mold toxins, okay? All right, so let me show you a whole article that I've got about that. And the article has a 10-minute video with it that covers the same things I probably just did, maybe a little bit of a different way. But I'm gonna just show that to you here in just a minute. I'm gonna do a screen share. Okay, let's see here. Oh, so this is my I'm sorry. This is my supplement store. Anyone can buy supplements here. If you're wondering, when I talk about supplements and I use generic names tonight, you're wondering what products do I think have the highest quality. You can take a look here at what I offer, and again, anyone can buy from here as well too. So this is for old patients of mine, but anyone can buy from this site too. Okay, all right, let me go over here. So this is my Lyme disease information site, Treat Lyme by Marty Ross MD. Take a look at my online Lyme guide here, and took a look at the section called detoxification. Right here is my article on mold and Lyme toxin illness, okay? And you'll see, I was actually just modifying this a little bit today, doing an edit on it. And I just put this video in. It's about a 10-minute video clip from a previous webinar where if you're wanting to hear again this approach, take a look there, okay? All right, but in turn, one thing I did want to show you is that there are what I call specific binders, this section here, that you use based on what your actual toxins are, okay? So for instance, okra toxins are bound best by cholestyramine and activated charcoal. Aflatoxins are bound best by activated charcoal and bentonite clay. Trichocethenes, which come from true black mold, not the chitonium you described there, are bound best by activated charcoal. And so anyhow, just take a look at that section here as well too, okay? All right. All right, Sherry, it's a very long-winded response, but it's just not as simple as telling you which ones to take, because there's reasons to consider testing, okay? Even though I know there's expense to it as well too. Okay, good luck to you. Hello, Byron. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. I've been on Doxy, Malarone, and Rifampin for BART, BABS, and Lyme since November of 2018. In early March 2019, I started getting significant bloating, fatigue, sense of fullness in the stomach, and developed neurologic symptoms of dizziness, blurred vision, etc. I came off Doxy slowly and then completely eliminated it for 3 days and felt so much better. But stayed on the Rifampin and Malarone during that time. My doctor switched me from Doxy to Zithromax, but the bloating came back again. Can I take a break from the Doxy or Zithromax, but stay on the co-infection medications, or will it not eradicate the infection completely? Can I use herbal medications as an alternative to the Doxy Zithromax while staying on antibiotics for BART and BABS? Also, what is your opinion on the cardio exercise if you have the stamina while on antibiotics for Lyme treatment? Thank you for your advice and help. Byron in New York City. All right, so let me see if I can kind of address a couple things here, okay? So when many of you may be familiar that there's a way that we can use antibiotics for the Lyme infection called pulsing, okay? And unfortunately, some of my colleagues also do pulsing of antibiotics for Bartonella and Babesia, which I don't think is a good idea, okay? So, and here's why. So pulsing means starting and stopping antibiotics, all right? Bartonella replicates about every 24 hours. Babesia also rapidly replicates too. And so what happens is in the days that you are off of antibiotics that address antibiotics, antimicrobials that address those germs, they come back fast, okay? On the other hand, the Lyme germ, it is actually okay to stop a treatment that targets the Lyme germ for weeks, sometimes 1 to 2 months, because that germ grows extremely, extremely slow. It is not going to come back rapidly, okay? All right. So one thing that I would do in my practice, and this is something for you to talk with your doctor about too, one of the things that could be happening here with that gassiness and bloating, that makes me wonder about if you've got an imbalance of healthy bacteria in your intestines relative to yeast that are living there. Okay, so in other words, you may have some yeast overgrowth, or you may have normal amounts of yeast, but you just may not have a good enough amount of good, healthy bacteria to balance them, okay? So sometimes to deal with that gassiness and bloating, you need to come off of some of the antibiotics to make it easier for good bacteria to reestablish a good balance in the intestines, all right? So in my practice, what I would do sometimes in some of a situation like this is I might try to pull back on some of the antibiotics while not interfering with the Bartonella and Babesia treatment. Because if you stop those, if you knock those treatments off, if you stop it altogether, you're going back to time 0 again in terms of how long it's going to take to get rid of them again. Okay, all right. So with gassiness and bloating, what I would like to do if I had a patient like that in my practice, I would double the probiotics they were on already sometimes. Okay, so for instance, if they were on a spore-based or a soil-based spore-forming probiotic, like a core biotic, for instance, and they're doing 2 a day, I might have them start taking 4 a day. I might even add to that human-type bacteria, which would be lactobacillus and bifidobacterium, and I might have them take 2 to 4 pills 1 time a day of that as well too. Okay, so kind of the big thing to do when you've got, and the reason I'm wondering about if you've got just not quite enough of this good bacteria is when you go back on the antibiotics, those ones you stop, you added back the Zithromax and you were on a doxycycline, you stopped it got better, you go back on Zithromax, things get worse. I have to wonder, are you just kind of on the edge of not having enough good bacteria in your intestines? Okay, so I would consider, if I had somebody like this, what I did in my practice, I'd often just have them take more probiotics and that would take care of it. Okay. All right. So that's one thing to consider. Okay. In terms of your question, is Malarone and rifampin then going to be enough to keep your Bartonella and your Babesia at bay? Maybe. Malarone sometimes by itself, I found, could be enough of a treatment to get Babesia out. Bartonella, the problem is that Bartonella actually does better being treated by at least 2 antibiotics at the same time. And rifampin, although it can be a pretty good anti-Bartonella, it just often is not enough. So what I would do in a situation like this, if I wanted to come off of a Doxy or a Zithromax and have a person on a rifampin or Malarone, and I didn't want to give up totally the benefits we were getting, is I definitely throw a bunch of probiotics at them. But also the other thing I found helpful sometimes is to add the herb called Houttenia. Houttenia has antimicrobial properties that can help with Bartonella. It tends not to give the same degree of problem at knocking down the good bacteria in the intestines that I found a Doxy or a Zithromax would, for instance, okay? And a Houttenia dosing that I found effective in my practice was to start at about 5 drops twice a day and work up to 30 drops twice a day. I have articles about how to do that at Treat Lyme, okay? So you might want to consider doing that. Talk to your physician and see if that's the right thing for you to do too. Okay. All right. Now, in terms of cardio exercise, I know that many of you may be familiar with a Lyme doctor that no longer is treating patients, but Dr. Burrascano. Burrascano was one of the Lyme pioneers. Many of us learned some really good things from Burrascano. And I know Burrascano promoted an idea that he did not think aerobic exercise was good in Lyme. I actually disagree with him. I think Burrascano had a lot of great ideas, but I don't think all of them were quite right. I think the issue with exercise is that you have to follow a rule with exercise. That is, you can exercise to tolerance. All right. Now that, I know that sounds kind of nebulous. All right. But let me try to explain what I mean by that. So what happens is there is a known phenomenon that can happen with exercise called neuromediated fatigue, which is if you exercise too much, you are going to pay the price the next day, usually, okay? And what that is you're going to have more fatigue, more body pain. And the concern is over time, it might even wind up suppressing the immune system, all right? So what you can do is, what I did in my practice that I found very helpful was to have patients find an amount of exercise they could do that did not knock them down the next day, okay? So that could be 5 minutes of speed walking. That might be just 5 minutes of slowly walking around the block or around the house, for instance, okay? Start slow, and whatever that exercise you like to do, just gradually build it up. Using as your guide, do you really pay the price a lot the next day, okay? Because I think any kind of exercise, whether it's aerobic or non-aerobic, can be very beneficial in Lyme. It helps with pain, can help with sleep, may help your immune system work better, can help with your recovery on the whole, okay? But the trick is to find something that's not going to knock you down terribly so that you're paying the price for it the next day. And over time, that can lead to some immune suppression as well, too, okay? At least that's what my concern is, all right? Now, I think, let's see. Yeah, I think I answered your question there. So I hope, work with your physician about some of these ideas that I just talked about. But I definitely would, I think I gave you a number of things to consider to talk with your provider about. Okay. All right. Thanks, Byron, for that question. Okay. Oh, so I mentioned something there. I have put up a whole new article. I think it was just this last week, about maybe a week and a half ago, about probiotics. Okay, you can find it at Treat Lyme, where I describe the differences between soil-based spore-forming probiotics and then the traditional probiotics, which I call human-based probiotics. Those are the ones that have lactobacillus and bifidobacterium. I know I mentioned that briefly here, but if you want more information, let me just show you where you would find that. All right, so if you're ever wondering what it is that I have published, and it's in between times that we talk, you can take a look at this page called The Latest, okay? And the way you find it is this blue button right here, all right? So for instance, I recently updated an old article I had called Prevent Yeast and Leaky Gut Syndrome, Take These Steps, okay? All right. I've also updated an article I have about thyroid and the adrenals and rewritten sections of it. So you'll find it here. But here is that article on probiotics in a Lyme treatment. All right. So take a look at that as well, too. Okay. All right. Let me go back here. All right. Let's see here. Hello, Ruth. Let's see. Hold on here just a minute. Let's see. I was diagnosed with Lyme disease and mycoplasma and chlamydia pneumonia, and having intermittent night sweats for the last year. Usually comes in waves and clusters around my menstrual cycle. I have tested negative for Babesia. I know the testing isn't great. I have been on Stephen Buhner's Babesia herbs and Malarone 1 tab twice a day for a few months, and the night sweats haven't gone away. Is there something else my doctor and I should explore, either treatment-wise or diagnostically? I did have my hormones checked, and my doctor did not see any issues. So Ruth, I guess one thing I would say, I know your doctor, you tested the hormones. It doesn't mean that you still could not be having perimenopause, which is the period before you go into menopause and you start having sweats because you're getting decreased estrogen and even progesterone production. It would be helpful for me to make some comments if I knew your age. I'm sorry about that, but if you happen to be near the age of 50, which is often the age where women either are going into menopause or are in menopause, or perimenopause means the period of time where your ovaries are not releasing eggs as regularly, and therefore they are not making as much estrogen and decreasing amounts of progesterone, that can sometimes be very responsible for those night sweats. And although we as doctors like to rely on testing is not always accurate, okay? Sometimes we just have to use a clinical hunch. So if I had a patient that was near 50, even in their low 40s, and they gave me a story that they're getting sweats just around the time of their period or one time a month, I would start thinking it is hormonal, even if the hormones were normal. And I might even consider trying progesterone, possibly in the last half of the month. I might consider adding that or working with herbs like something called Vitex that can help raise progesterone levels as well too. But I would re-talk about that with your physicians to make sure, because sometimes, again, the testing is not always accurate. The reason I also raise that is the typical pattern with Babesia is that you're going to have increased sweats almost nightly, not just around your period time, okay? So I have to question, if I had a patient like this, I would be questioning whether it truly is Babesia. And to call it Babesia, I would want to know more about the other Babesia symptoms. I would be asking about questions about not only night sweats. I would be asking about, are there panic attacks? Do you have a sense of air hunger, feeling you can't get enough air? Sometimes people with Babesia have very frequent deja vu experiences. Sometimes they have a lot of headache problems in the front of their head. And sometimes they can get a bunch of little red blood spots or blister spots under their skin, okay? So I guess those are some thoughts for you to consider. Go back and talk with your doctor again. Beyond that, I don't have any other ideas for you at this point. Okay. All right. Good luck to you, Ruth. Hello, Sita. Let's see. Are crawling sensations in the head typical of Lyme and co-infections? If so, what causes it? What about pubic bone pain? Can you please explain what actually technically happens in the body when inflammation occurs? Have you seen any improvements with CBD? Okay. So, crawling sensations often can be a symptom of neurologic injury or the nerves being inflamed. Okay. That tends to be more of a neurologic symptom. What can do that? Well, Bartonella can, sometimes Lyme can. Sometimes those are the infections that sometimes can lead to that. Pubic bone pain is just I don't find that specific to any one infection. I just find it or found it in my practice to be another way that inflammation can show up. Okay. Can you please explain what actually technically happens in the body when inflammation occurs? So inflammation is basically caused by a group of chemicals called cytokines. Okay, so what happens is the immune system, in trying to get rid of Lyme infection, manufactures these chemicals called cytokines. On the one hand, they're good. Okay, on the good side, the right amount of cytokines helps turn the immune system on. It helps to create more white blood cells, helps to draw those white blood cells to where the infection is, and they help the white blood cells work better. That's good. Okay, but in excess, these cytokines set up various chemical processes that make you hurt. They can cause tissue swelling. They cause your brain not to work correctly. They interfere with how your hormones function to basically give you all your Lyme disease symptoms. Okay. Beyond that, I can't give you the more specific answer than that. Okay. Let's see. Have you seen the improvements with CBD? So, CBD. So as you all know, I'm not practicing now. I'm in Texas, but when I was practicing, I was in Washington State. Okay. So I've got a lot of experience with people either being on recreational marijuana or on medicinal marijuana, because in Washington State, there was laws that allowed for both of those options. So CBD, as many of you know, is a type of oil that comes from marijuana plants. Okay. And it is, or from cannabis plants, I should say. Okay, now CBD, to be called CBD, cannot have more than 0.03% THC in it. THC is the chemical that we get from marijuana. It's what gives the high of marijuana. Okay, CBD, on the other hand, because it has such a small amount of THC in it, tends not to give the high. Okay, that's one of the big differences between the two. Okay. Now, there is a system in the body called the endocannabinoid system. Okay, that's a mouthful. So endocannabinoid system, all right, which is our body's natural marijuana system, if you will. And there's various receptors. The two predominant ones are something called a CB1 and a CB2 receptor, all right? All right, THC from marijuana binds to the CB1 receptor, all right? All right, the way that CBD works is CBD doesn't bind. Well, I think it may bind weakly to the CB2 receptor, but generally it's really not binding to much. Okay. What it does is it prevents the breakdown of the normal marijuana-like chemicals that we make in our body. Okay. One of those is something called anandamide. I'm blanking on the second one. There's two predominant ones that our immune systems will wind up making. Okay. And what it does is it prevents the breakdown of those, so that there's more available to bind to both the CB1 and CB2 receptors then, basically. All right. So the marijuana works with THC directly on one of the receptors, versus the way that CBD works is it works by blocking enzymes that then leads to more of the active chemicals that we naturally make in our bodies. All right. Now, both of them tend to be a little bit better in certain situations. THC is probably better at helping people get sleep. Some people will get sleep on CBD, but THC predominant is probably better at inducing sleep. It may be a little bit better at pain control as well too. But both can help with inflammation, pain. Both can do some degree of help with sleep, although I find THC to be better. Okay. There's other benefits from those as well too. And let me just show you the article that I have on this where I break that down a little bit more. The problem with marijuana is there's a lot of interest in medical marijuana and CBD these days. The problem is that we are just limited in the actual research that is available because the federal government blocked research for so long in this area. Okay. All right. But anyhow, this article breaks down and looks at the various kinds of research that we do have. Okay. I talk about the endocannabinoid system here, for instance, and the various receptors. Okay. That other receptor chemical, there's anandamide and there's something called 2-AG. That was the one that I was forgetting the name of. Okay. All right. So what kind of things can it help with? I go through a whole list for you right here. Okay. These are the things that medical experimentation has shown that CBD and THC may help with. I would take a look at this comprehensive list. One of those is reducing pain. Okay. In my practice, when I was treating, I found THC to be a bit stronger at dealing with pain than CBD. However, THC has the side effect of leaving you sleepy. Okay. All right. So for more information, take a look at this whole article. Okay. All right. Thanks for that question, Sit up. Hello, Craig. Let's see. I hear you talk about cytokines a lot. Is there testing available to determine if one is making too many cytokines and to gauge levels as treatment progresses? Craig, there is testing, but I've never found it to be fully reliable. I like that. And I think part of the problem is we're probably not able to test for all the cytokines that are actually being made. But yeah, there is. You could probably talk to your physicians about that. It was something, though, that I did not find useful over time at helping to gauge my treatments. Okay. All right. Hello. Yeah. Oh, hi. Yes, Gloria. The webinar started. Sorry, I was running a little bit late tonight at getting here, but anyhow, there we go. Hello, John. Let's see. Dr. Ross, cat claw is very estrogenic. Will taking DIM reduce the estrogen from cat's claw? I am worried about prostate problems with all the extra estrogen. Do you think there is a significant risk of cat's claw causing prostate problems? John, yeah. So cat's claw may have a weak, do you hear the word weak estrogen effect? Okay. In working with cat's claw for over 10 years of working with my practice in Seattle, never saw a man have complications with prostate problems by being on cat's claw. I would just reflect that. Okay. The thing that tends to really affect prostate is testosterone. All right. Not so much so estrogen. And again, it's an estrogenic effect, which is not the same as estrogen. Okay. So, I don't know. I think that although people write about it, I think in males it has limited to non-existent problems. That was my experience working with it. The biggest problem I saw from the estrogenic effect is that cat's claw sometimes would give people bumps that look like pimples, very small red spots with little white areas in them. Okay, that was the biggest thing that I saw, and it could happen in men and women. But I just did not see prostate problems occurring from being on cat's claw. In terms of DIM, I don't know, because again, I just never saw that as a problem. I never used it with people on cat's claw to be able to comment on that. I'm not sure if it would or would not work. Okay. So in terms of answering your problem, do I think there's significant problems with cat's claw and prostate? I don't think so. I just didn't see it. Okay. If you are concerned about it, in my treatment protocol, as well as information that you see on my site, I mentioned that there are two herbs that I liked working with in combination when I was treating, and that is to work with cat's claw in combination with otoba bark. Okay, If I did have somebody that developed complications on being on both the cat's claw and the Otoba, and it was because they were just getting too many pimples, basically, I would sometimes pull away that cat's claw, and in place of it, I would use teasel root. Teasel root is another herb that can be effective in Lyme. I would use it with some success. I still think that a cat's claw Otoba combination is probably the strongest based on what I saw clinically in my practice. I think that combination works about 85 to 90% of the time. And as many of you know, I've talked before about research that's been done as Petri dish experiments by Eva Choppy, where she showed some pretty significant killing when you use both of those herbs together. But clinically in my practice, sometimes I would substitute in the teasel for the cat's claw and found some benefit that way. A dose of teasel that I would work up to, I just dosed it the same way that I would a cat's claw and an Otoba. And that is teasel, you would start at 5 drops twice a day, and you could work up gradually up to 30 drops twice a day. Okay. All right. Yeah. Anyhow, so in terms of those two herbs, let me just do a quick screen share here, everyone. Okay, so again, this is my the Ross Lyme support protocol. Okay, and in here you'll find all the steps I think a person should take to recover from Lyme. And I address things like sleep, diet, lowering cytokines, being on something called an adaptogen to help the body deal with stress, correcting hormonal imbalances, being a good multivitamin, doing some basic detox steps, exercising, treating yeast if they're growing too much in your intestines. And then here in part 11 is where I talk about options to treat the Lyme infection, okay? And one of the options is this Otoba bark and cat's claw, okay? They tend to be my favorite herbs in terms of how they work and effectiveness, all right? So I've written a whole article about them. You can just click on it there. That's one way to get to it. You can also find those two herbs mentioned in this chapter called Anti-Germs, and I have it right there. Okay, so you can take a detailed look at those two herbs. Okay. All right. John, thank you for that question. Hello, John, again. Let's see. I hear of some people using MMS. What is your opinion of MMS? Is it safe to use? So MSS is a supplement. I don't even know what the MMS stands for, other than what I do know about it is it is a supplement that is basically an oxidizing agent. Okay. So other oxidizing agents, for instance, that people use in Lyme are hydrogen peroxide, ozone, high dose vitamin C. And as many of you may know from participating in these webinars, I am not a big believer in doing those. All right. And so, yes, I do agree that some people get benefit from doing those type of treatments, but I'm more concerned that it may come at the cost of long-term injury to the cells created by oxidizing agents. Okay. So oxidizing agents basically have the ability to work against germs by damaging the germ covering, which is a double layer of fat, and also damaging the germ DNA. Okay, so they can kill the germ, basically. Some doctors do ozone treatment, some do IV hydrogen peroxide, some do rectal ozone. Another way to do strong oxidizing agents is to use high doses of vitamin C, like 30 to 50 grams a day. When you do it that way, you have to do it IV. Okay, all right. But my concern is, I do think that there can be some germ killing, and the reason they can work effectively on germs is our germs generally don't have antioxidants. Okay, so they can't overcome the effects of this. Okay, the problem is that, as many of you are aware of, in anti-aging medicine, there's a big push to work with a lot of antioxidants. Okay, and why is that? Well, it's because our bodies naturally make a bunch of oxidizing agents as part of the cellular process of just living and waste products, okay? And our body, our blood, our cells are full of antioxidants to deal with that, all right? But over time, there still is an effect of oxidizing agents in us damaging our own cell membranes and damaging our DNA. That's what the aging process is about, okay? Now, if we're using oxidizing agents to kill our germs, we're probably speeding up that aging process. We are probably doing some damage to our own cell membranes and some damage to our DNA. Although I will admit we have antioxidants that can help to some degree, okay? So for that reason, I'm not a big fan of using oxidizing agents over time in excess amounts. I think it might be okay to do them on a limited basis, maybe 4 to 8 treatments, for instance, but on over time, I think there may be greater risk, okay? Now, I admit some people claim great benefits from doing those treatments. But if you look at the science about oxidizing agents and like an ozone or a hydrogen peroxide, what the studies tell us about ozone specifically is that if you take blood from somebody, if you trying to think how this experiment was done. All right, so our blood is full of antioxidants, okay? And if, in a test tube experiment, what they've done is they've taken germs in a test tube. They mixed about 5 to 10% of the liquid part of the blood into that test tube, and then they put ozone into it. And what they found when you mix the blood in is that there is no killing of those germs that take place. And the reason is that the antioxidants in the blood probably block the oxidizing effect on those germs, all right? So at least in the test tube, okay? Now, what may be happening, the reason that people may be feeling better when they do these is the other thing that happens when you do oxidation treatments, and this could even be like MMS is an oxidizing agent, okay? The other thing that happens is the oxidizing agents result in better delivery of oxygen into our cells and into the energy factories called mitochondria. And mitochondria, if they get better oxygenation, work better. And that can give you more energy, all right? So I think part of the reason that people feel better when they get their oxidation treatments, whether it's MMS, whether it is hydrogen peroxide, whether it's ozone, whether it's high dose vitamin C, is that they're getting better oxygenation of the mitochondria, okay? But again, that may be good short term. I'm just concerned when we do that repeatedly over months and years, is there a long-term problem of damage? Okay, all right. Let me show you the article that I've written about that. I didn't write specifically in the article about MMS, but MS does have an oxidizing agent aspect to how it works actually, okay? So bear with me here. All right, so the comments I make about, so the article is called Ozone, Hydrogen Peroxide, Vitamin C, UV blood irradiation, and Lyme. I could have put MMS in here too, okay? Take a look at this whole article where I talk about what science tells us and my concerns, all right? All right. Hello, Randy. Let's see. I have bad fatigue and muscle weakness and brain fog and memory loss mostly all of the time. Banderol and Cemento aren't helping. My doctor suggested peptide injections to rev up my immune system because nothing else is helping. What do you know about peptides and do you recommend them? So, Randy, I know that there are some doctors that are starting to do peptide treatments because it may help the immune system work better. I think it's too early to tell if they will be effective. And actually, I don't have practical experience in working with them. It's some information I need to start gathering from some physicians that are using this, but I don't know that off the top of my head. I think it's a bit early to tell if it will work, but it's a way of boosting the immune system, basically. Again, it may, but boosting the immune system may not be enough to actually kill your germs. All right. So anyway, those are my comments on that one. All right. I know. So the doctor that's been using them quite a bit, and I think is starting to write about them. You may want to Google his name is Kent Holtorf. at Holtorf Medical is tending to be one of the people that's kind of taken a lead in using these types of therapies. I haven't talked to him in a while, but I may have to talk with him and just see what his experience is actually showing on that. Okay. All right. Thank you. Hello, Eileen. Hold on here a minute, everyone. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. Thanks for all you do for us Lymeys. I was diagnosed with Lyme about 5 years ago. I did a year of pulsed antibiotics. I started the Hutinia cordata and the Citacuta about 2 months ago for Bartonella. I'm definitely improving. However, in the last couple of weeks, I started having dizzy spells, primarily at night when lying in bed, but occasionally when I am active and working. Any suggestions of causes or what I should do? Thanks again for your help. All right. So with dizziness, one thing I guess a couple thoughts. One is this is something I would definitely talk with your physician about. And the reason is they need to do some evaluation to figure out, is this a problem with the balancing part of your inner ear? Okay. Or is this a neurologic problem with a part of your brain back here called the cerebellum? Or could this potentially be a side effect of medications, maybe even the Sita and the Hutinia, although I haven't seen either one of those give dizziness before, okay? So one of the things I'd suggest you actually talk to your physician about this one. Doing a neurologic exam, they may be able to ascertain or figure out whether it's a part of the brain back here or whether it's coming from an inner problem. Okay. All right. So good luck to you, Eileen. Hello, Marie. Let's see. Good evening, Dr. Ross. I tested positive with Borrelia, but very high with Epstein-Barr virus, Chlamydia trachomatis, and Coxsackie virus. Where do I begin? My main symptoms are fatigue, muscle weakness, and joint pain. Thank you so much for all you do. Okay. So my general approach when I was practicing, and this is something I write about too, is to deal with the Lyme first. That those other problems that your doctors have identified may not be the problem. All right. All right. Now let me explain why I said that. Okay. So Coxsackie virus, Epstein-Barr virus, Chlamydia pneumoniae, these are infections that actually are common in healthy people. Okay. All right. And so just because your doctors have identified that they may be in you now does not mean that they're active in a way that could be hurting you. It could be that your immune system is doing a good job of what it's supposed to do, which is keeping them in check. Okay. So there are a group of infections that live in healthy people that don't cause problems. All right. Those are Epstein-Barr, parvovirus B19, Coxsackie viruses can be one of those, cytomegalovirus, human herpes virus type 6, human herpes virus type 8. Now, those herpes are respiratory herpes, not sexual herpes, okay? There's also chlamydia and mycoplasma bacteria that can live in healthy people too. And in fact, if you were to pull 100 healthy people off the street, we would probably find evidence in 10 to 20% of those healthy people of having elevated antibodies against those infections. And all that's happening is the immune system's dealing with it. We cohabitate with them. They live in us. They don't cause us problems. Our immune system keeps them under control. Okay. So I know a number of my colleagues, when they're trying to figure out what's going on with somebody with Lyme disease, they test for Lyme and they do antibody testing for these other infections. And then they think that they got to deal with all of it. Okay. And the issue is maybe not. And because it just maybe what they're picking up is germs that are living in you that your immune system isn't having any trouble with. Okay. Now, even if those infections have gotten more active, it may be due to immune suppression, probably caused by Lyme. So in trying to deal with those problems, the first step would be to do things to get Lyme under control. because if you can get Lyme under control, the immune system will start working better to put those other infections under control. Okay. So what my approach always was when I was practicing, and it's what I also recommend on my Lyme information site, is that you go after, in terms of infections, the main ones you want to go after right away are too many yeast if you have them living in your intestines. And the reason is if you have too many yeast in your intestines, they trigger too many cytokines to be made. Those too many cytokines suppress your immune system and make you feel bad the same way Lyme does. Okay, so see if there's too many yeast. If you have Bartonella, Babesia co-infections or Anaplasma co-infections or Ehrlichia co-infections, go after those right away as well too, and go after your Lyme. Okay. If in about 6 to 9 months in my practice, if somebody was not improving, then at that time, I might consider looking for the other infections that could be in them to see if they might be contributors, okay? But I would not look right away, because even if I found them, my treatment was going to be to go after Lyme and yeast. That was what my treatment was going to be, because those treatments often are enough to turn the immune system around so it will do what it's supposed to do, which is to put these kind of extra infections that live in healthy people and can even live in people with Lyme and not cause a problem back into check. Okay? All right. So, anyhow, let me just show you something here, because I often get asked, what do I do next? Screen share here. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to look at, I guess the way I'll do that, I'll look at my treatment protocol. Okay. So this is the Ross Lyme support protocol. Again, I showed this to you earlier, but the key steps are all things that are designed to lower cytokines and get the immune system working better. Okay. So get sleep, be on a good diet, lower cytokines with certain herbs, be on an adaptogen, hormones, etc. I'm just going to scale all the way down here, okay? Take care of your yeast, treat your Lyme, treat your co-infections, okay? And then I have the last part of my protocol is part 14, special considerations, okay? And it's here where I say 6 months and beyond, if you are not getting better, start considering other problems. And you'll notice one of the things I have here is chronic viruses. I don't believe in going after them right away. And I don't even have any information here about Mycoplasma and chlamydia, because I really don't think they're a problem. I know none of my colleagues do. But even if I'm wrong, one thing you should be aware of is the antibiotics, the antimicrobials that you would use to treat your Lyme, intracellular Lyme that lives in cells, those antibiotics, those antimicrobials will also take care of chlamydia and mycoplasma. So if you're treating the Lyme infection for at least the bacteria, chlamydia and mycoplasma, if they really are active, probably the things you're using to treat Lyme are taking care of those infections at the same time too. Okay? All right. All right. Good luck to you. Hello, Daniel. Let's see. I have rifampin and minocycline, and have recently found very high levels of LDL and triglycerides and very high testosterone. Let's see here. Oh, there's a second part here. Let's see here. Clearly, I eat very good vegetarian diet and am stumped as to why. Is my liver at risk? So in terms of your question, I don't know. I have not seen a relationship between being on rifampin and minocycline leading to elevated cholesterol and triglycerides. Okay. I haven't seen that relationship before. That's not to say it's not happening in you. I just haven't seen it after, I treated Lyme since 2004 until the end of 2018 in my Seattle practice. And in all those years, I never saw that happen. Okay. All right. In terms of your liver at risk, the only thing I see that you're on that could affect liver function is the rifampin. Rifampin can lead to liver inflammation. The way to see if that's happening is to get a liver test, have your doctor do a liver test to see is there inflammation. Okay. Most people tolerate rifampin fine. Maybe about 10 or 15% of the time they have to change it because of side effects or too much liver inflammation. Okay. All right. Good luck to you, Daniel. Hello, Virginia. See ya. Hi, doctor. I have Lyme and many co-infections. Also, very high for strep for 5 years now. How does that mix in how to treat? I'm not sure what you meant by anisotite here. I'm not understanding your question with that. Um, so I'm not sure what you mean by anisotite. I'm not familiar with that. So I'm gonna have a hard time answering your question here. Okay. Sorry about that. Hello, James. Let's see. Thank you, doctor, for all your help. I think I have Lyme Bart infection for around 8 years, but 3 years ago when I got sick with flu, I believe Lyme has entered my brain. Since then, back of my head has been sour or sore, and I have been having headaches and pressure in my head. Because of the soreness, I never was able to lie down on my back. I have high sensitivity to sounds, and speaking for a longer duration triggers the symptoms. Any specific medication that can relieve these symptoms. I have used various herbal protocols in the last 3 years. I have not been seeing big improvement in my condition. I'm currently on Commanda Hutinia for the last 1 year. In my recent appointment with my ND, I requested him to take a look at your protocol. He said the Otoba is not testing good with me. He has changed my protocol to Cemento, Banderol, and Hutinia. I do not know how they can tell whether a certain medicine works or not. What are your thoughts? Your inputs are very appreciated. Can you also please suggest any good sleep protocol? Thank you. James, I'm going to have a hard time with this. And the reason is this is a kind of situation that if I was still had the ability to do clinical consults or phone consults or Skype consults, I would. I would want to know a lot. I have to ask you a lot of questions because you've been through a lot already. I would need to know a little bit more about the different reactions were, how long were you on various things, etc. So I'm not going to be able to give you specific recommendations here on what to do. In terms of what your ND may be doing, they're saying that the herb did not test well for you. I'm questioning if they're doing some type of testing, an energetic type of testing called ART testing that was perfected by a Seattle physician named Dietrich Klinghardt. Dietrich, I think, does a great job with that testing. I'm not so keen on the people that he trained. I think a lot of them do not do a good job of doing it to figure out if medicines work good for a person or not. Okay. In terms of things to try for sleep, there are a few articles I'll show you to take a look at. One with herbal prescription options, one with prescription medicine options. And then the third article is one that talks about good sleep hygiene, things you can do to help get to sleep. Okay. Generally, what you're going to want to do is take a look at those. I'll show them to you here in a second. In terms of sleep, in terms of things you can take for sleep, I like looking at what I call short acting and long acting. Those are called the get you outs and the keep you outs. Sometimes you have to mix both together. Sometimes you have to mix multiple herbs or multiple prescriptions and herbs to get sleep in this illness. Okay. But let me go ahead and point you to those articles. You can take a look at those later. Okay. All right. So one starting place to take a look at would be to look at my sleep recommendations that I mentioned here. There's a couple natural medicines you could take alone or together. One is to use something called L-theanine combined with other herbs like valerian root, hops, yams, wild lettuce. Okay, all right, that's one option. Sometimes you can use a long-acting sleep medicine called trazodone combined with a short acting called Ambien. Okay, because the problem in people with Lyme is they often have a problem with falling asleep and then staying asleep. So sometimes you need to take things that address both of those. Okay. Then from this section, you can see that there are 3 articles I'd have you take a look at. One is called Sleep and Lyme Disease, the Basic Steps. The second one is Sleep, the Natural Medicines. And the third one is Sleep, the Prescription Medicines. Okay. I would take a look at those. That probably is going to give you some insights on things you can try for your sleep. Okay. All right. Good luck to you, James. I'm sorry I can't give you more specific advice in terms of what to do with your situation. And the reason I can't do the consults anymore is when I used to do those, I lived in Seattle, Washington, where I am licensed. I now live in Austin, Texas, where I am not licensed. And because of that, if I were to give direct advice in a one-to-one consult like that, I could be charged with practicing medicine without a license. If you notice the way that I do a lot of my responses to the questions here tonight, I look at people's questions and then I reflect back what I did with patients in my practice in similar situations, because I'm talking about, based on my experience, what did I do? I'm playing back to you what I did, but I'm not actually on any of these questions. I haven't told people exactly what to do with their specific situation. And that's a way of avoiding getting called out by the board here for practicing medicine. Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Hello, Devin. Let's see. I have supposedly been cleared from Lyme, but every time I get sick with simple things, it knocks me out for weeks, even months at a time. I'm still taking herbs just in case, but I'm wondering if you have any advice on why this might be happening or what to try to keep it from happening. Okay. So, Devin, I'm not sure how it is that they determine that your Lyme is cleared. Okay. So, first question I would wonder is maybe that isn't correct that it's cleared. Okay. Second thing, though, that you might want to consider doing is, given that various infections knock you down so much, you might want to be, or what I would do in this kind of situation, because this would happen with some of my patients too. What I did with those patients is I would have them take herbs and supplements to boost their immune system, so the immune system is more ready to actually deal with these infections, so they tend to not to get knocked down so much. Okay. So herbs that can be helpful for boosting the immune system are mushrooms. Mushrooms, have an ability to turn on the type of cells that fight virus infections, and those are called T cells. For something like this, I might look at having a person take a complex of mushrooms. For instance, there's one by JHS Naturals that has 5 different kinds of mushrooms in it. That's called the Immune Builder 5 Mushroom Formula. And I might have a person take 1 pill 3 times a day as a preventive. I also might consider doing things in terms of working with what are called transfer factors. Transfer factors are chemicals made by white blood cells that also are made by certain types of white blood cells that turn on the white blood cells that are supposed to fight infections. Okay. And there's a mix called transfer factor multi-immune that is targeted at the cells that make up our frontline defenses against any kind of infection. And that is something I might do. I would have my patients take 1 pill twice a day. Okay. All right. The other thing is, if there is a chance that Lyme infection could still be active, you can sometimes work with the immune system, kind of keep that tamped down too. And there is a specific transfer factor product that have transfer factors in it that target the immune system just against Lyme and the Lyme co-infections. And that is a product called Transfer Factor L+. And that transfer factor product has in it transfer factors against Lyme, Bartonella, Babesia, Ehrlichia, Anaplasma, believe chlamydia pneumoniae, human herpes virus type 6, cytomegalovirus, and the Epstein-Barr virus. And the way to take that would be as 1 pill twice a day. Okay. So what I found helpful in my patients that would get repeated infections again and again, whether they were in Lyme treatment or out of Lyme treatment, was to take steps to boost the immune system. And those were be on a mushroom formula, 1 pill 3 times a day, be on a transfer factor multi-immune, 1 pill twice a day, and do something called transfer factor L+. If I thought Lyme was still part of the problem, I would have them do the L+, one pill twice a day. Okay? All right. Good luck to you. Let's see. Hi, Diane. Let's see. How do globulin levels affect Lyme and co-infections? You recommend testing globulin levels. Thank you. So globulins are proteins, are antibodies, basically. Okay. And so that's a good question, because actually it kind of affects the last person too. So globulins, antibodies, are what we use as one of our frontline defenses to deal with infections. Okay. So what happens with antibodies is our immune system sees an infection, and one thing it can do is take antibodies, and these antibodies attach to a germ, and they kind of identify that germ to the rest of the immune system to come get it. And then cells that eat germs come in and deal with it. Okay, so those cells that eat germs would be the T cells. There's another type of white blood cell called B cells. They're the ones that make antibodies. And those antibodies, when they're made, then land on a germ, and they kind of tag it for removal. Okay. So in somebody that has a poor production of antibodies, because they have some injuries where they're not able to do that, they're going to have low antibody levels, and they've lost one of the ways that the immune system works to get rid of infections. All right. So there is a blood test you can do, and it might be something that I would consider doing in one of my patients. If we were like a year or more into treatment and they weren't getting better, I might consider doing it then. The other group of people that I might look at it and is the person that just gets repeated infections, kind of like this last person was describing. In that kind of a situation, I might do the globulin testing as well too. Okay. All right. Thanks for that question, Diane. Hello, Gloria. Let's see. I'd like to know your thoughts on hyperbaric oxygen treatment as an effective supplement to other treatment for Lyme. Can it help, or is it dangerous? Okay. So it's interesting. So hyperbaric oxygen, probably around the time that I started treating Lyme disease, which was back in 2004 through probably about 2007, there was a big movement on people trying hyperbaric oxygen. Okay. It was the thing. It was the treatment of the season back then, basically. All right. Doctors were buying tanks to put in their offices, and there was clinics that had set up hard shell tanks to do the hyperbaric treatments. So, for instance, there was a big one in Chico, California, that was established by a doctor who had family members, I believe, that had Lyme as well too. Okay. All right. But what happened is, and so what happens with hyperbaric oxygen is oxygen itself is an oxidizing agent. Okay. All right. So when you're doing a hyperbaric oxygen treatment, you give oxygen, people breathe in oxygen at 100%. All right. Normal air is 21%. So you're getting a lot of oxygen that way. So one of the benefits could be that you get killing from the oxygen. Okay. The second thing is the hyperbaric, the pressure part of this actually helps push that oxygen into the tissues so that you might get better killing just from it getting pushed to where the Lyme is. But if you happen to be on antibiotics and get hyperbaric oxygen treatments, that pressure may be doing a good job of actually pushing the antibiotics, herbal or prescription, into where the germs are. Okay. All right. Now, we thought this was the big thing. We were all sending patients off to get hyperbaric oxygen, et cetera. But basically after about 3 or 4 years of that, doctors trying in their offices and also sending people off to Chico and places like that, we just decided this doesn't work that well. Most doctors got rid of their tanks, And even Chico, which had the hyperbaric chamber that was the hard shell, shut down and sold itself to the local hospital where it's now used to treat wounds. Okay. All right. So the truth is, in terms of being something that creates radical improvements for patients, it probably doesn't work that well. All right. Now, where can it be helpful though? So hyperbaric oxygen also is useful for improving nerve function, aiding in nerve repair, that is, and helping your energy factories in your cells called mitochondria work better. And so it is something I would consider in my patients in Seattle when I was practicing. If we're doing things to improve their situation, and maybe they get a lot of improvement in symptoms, but their brain function doesn't turn around or their neuropathy doesn't turn around. And that kind of a situation, I might consider doing hyperbaric or recommending to them hyperbaric oxygen treatments, okay? Now, for the most effective hyperbaric oxygen treatments would be ones where you go to a tank where you can dive to pressure of 2.4 atmospheres. That has to be a tank that is a hard shell tank, not one that is a soft shell tank, okay? The soft shell tank, I think, can only go down to about 2 atmospheres. It just is not enough pressure, all right? And if you're going to do it, you're going to need to be doing anywhere from about 20 to 40 treatments. All right, that's a lot of treatments. And you can do up to 2 treatments a day. They last about an hour a piece, but it becomes quite spendy. I think 20 treatments is going to run about $7,000 depending on where you are. So it's one of those things that I would recommend in specific situations when I was practicing. One is I was not recommending it as a way of aiding and killing germs. I just don't think it works that well for that, okay? I was recommending it, however, in patients that had done everything they could and they just wanted to try everything possible to maybe move it forward. I might recommend it, but I would explain to them I don't think it's going to be good at killing germs. The other situation, though, that I think it might be beneficial in is somebody that has just got a lot of brain dysfunction or logic dysfunction, because I think it may aid in the repair. Okay. All right. Thanks for the question, Gloria. Hello, Daniel. Let's see. Alinea from India, made by Lupin, and you say not too good, but much cheaper. Is this manufacturer any good or not? So Alinea, everyone, is an antiparasitic that was made to treat intestinal parasite infections. Okay, the mechanism by which it works is that it works on germs that are known as anaerobic, meaning they don't need oxygen. And it just happens, Lyme happens to be an anaerobic infection too. Okay. Now, I liked using Alinea to treat people with possible parasite infections in the intestines. I found it to work good in that situation. A number of my colleagues will also use it to treat Lyme because of its ability to treat anaerobic infections. And I had used it in that fashion as well to treat the Lyme germ. And I found mixed results. Sometimes it helped, sometimes it didn't. But it's super expensive here in the States, okay? So that was a limiting factor on that, okay? Some of my colleagues also use it to treat Babesia because it's an antiparasitic. Babesia is a parasite. They think that because it's an antiparasitic, it should work for Babesia. That was not my experience. And I think what the problem is with using it to treat Babesia is that Babesia is actually an aerobic germ. It's not an anaerobic germ. Okay, Babesia lives in blood cells that have lots of oxygen in them. Okay, so I just never found it useful for that. All right, so where I think Alinea can be useful is intestinal parasite infections. I think sometimes it can help with a Lyme germ infection, but in terms of something that can be useful for Babesia, that was not my experience with it. Okay, all right. So that may be what you're commenting when you're saying you say not too good. I think that's what you're referring to. In terms of where to get it, well, Alinea is expensive here in the States. Okay, it can run upwards, I think, around $1,400, $1,500 for a 1 month supply. That's expensive. All right. Some people can get it from India, I know, at low cost. I truly don't know who good manufacturers are there. I've never looked into that. So, Daniel, I'd be unable to give you some directions on that. Okay? All right. Thanks for that question, though. Hello, Kimberly. Let's see. Hello, Dr. Ross. Thanks for these great webinars. You're welcome. I'm wanting to get started on a treatment plan and don't know what to tackle first. Lyme, BART, or BABS. Want to try cryptolepis for BABS. Is that enough alone? Also, should I start all meds at once or add one at a time? Most of my symptoms are BABS, but also have anxiety, insomnia, and worst one is just head pressure, back of head with dizziness. Just started the curcumin and we'll start glutathione too. Does low dose antibiotics kill any germs or is full strength needed? Worried about Herx. I tolerate Bactrim, Doxy, and Zithromax pretty well. Thanks, Kimberly. Okay, so Kimberly, if you notice in my Lyme disease treatment protocol, there's basically 14 steps, okay, that I say, and you can pretty much do them all at the same time. And that is sleep, lower cytokines, be on a good diet, be on an adaptogen, correct your hormonal problems, treat yeast if yeast is there, okay? All right, now when it comes to deciding which of your Lyme and related germs to treat, I always would start by treating Lyme, and I would pick one of the co-infections to do at the same time. And that could either be Babesia or Bartonella, okay? Now, if Babesia was not the major problem, if Babesia wasn't driving the whole show, often I would go with Lyme and Bartonella first, get rid of Bartonella, and then turn around and start going after the Babesia, okay? And the reason I would do that was based on the observations of Burriscano. And I mentioned Burriscano earlier tonight. Burriscano was one of the great Lyme treatment pioneers here in the States, okay? Burriscano observed in his practice that if he had somebody that had Lyme, Bartonella, and Babesia, those three, and he treated for Babesia before getting rid of Bartonella, it was harder to get rid of the Bartonella. And I don't know why. He didn't know why, but that was his experience, okay? So because of that, generally my approach when I was treating was to go with Lyme and Bartonella first. You can treat those two at the same time. There's no problem doing that, okay? And once I had Bartonella taken care of, then I would add in treatment to take care of the Babesia, okay? Now, that was just a general rule, okay? I would break that rule sometimes because I love breaking rules. But the reason I would break that rule is if I had somebody whose major symptoms were all Babesia, I mean, the most major problem they were having is Babesia, and Bartonella was lower down the list of things that was really bothering them, I would go for Babesia first, okay? So in terms of can cryptolepis be an effective Babesia treatment on its own, I think it works about 70-75% of the time on its own. So it's possible. If you're going to use the cryptolepis, just realize that if it is working, you should start seeing some improvement in those symptoms by about 1 to 2 months, meaning the Babesia symptoms, okay? All right, so those would be just some ideas to keep in mind, okay? In terms of do low-dose antibiotics work? Not as well as high dose, but it's okay if you take time to build up to a dose that works best for you. There's no problem in doing that. Just realize it may take a little bit longer to get your germs under control, okay? Excuse me here. I just swallowed wrongly here. Hold on a minute. Oh, I don't think that's going to go away here. All right, Kimberly. So I hope that answers your question. All right. All right, everyone. This thing is going to drive me nuts. I'm going to call it quits for tonight. We're already about 7:27 here in Central Standard Time, and I've got to get my throat cleared out. So I enjoyed visiting with you all here tonight. Tomorrow morning, take time to sign up when you get my email for next week's webinar. I look forward to seeing you at that. And then I will send out an email tomorrow morning with information about how to watch the recording when it's ready. If you happen not to get that email, the recording is always available on the homepage at treatlyme.net. It's available on the homepage at my supplement store, treatlyme.com. It's available on Facebook. It's available on YouTube. And yeah, I think those are the 4 places you can find it. Okay. And on the treatlyme.net, it's also available on the webinars page. Okay. All right. Take care, everyone. Good visiting with you here tonight. Good night.